she should not have been in that corridor. The Alpha's private meeting hall was sealed after sundown. Everyone in Greymoor Pack knew this, and everyone in Greymoor Pack respected it, because the wolves who forgot that rule had a habit of not forgetting anything afterward. Lena had been delivering a message to the Eastern Steward, a simple errand. 30 seconds out of her evening that should have taken her nowhere near the heavy oak door at the corridor's end. Except the Eastern Steward's room was locked, and the only alternate route back to the servants' quarters ran directly past that door, and the door was not fully closed. She heard Riven's voice first, her mate's voice, the one she had spent 2 years building a life around, low and easy with the particular relaxed warmth it took when he was comfortable with his company. His beta, Cord, 2 of his senior wolves. The sound of a fire and poured drinks and the specific atmosphere of men who believed they were entirely alone. Someone's asking whether you actually love her. Laughter. Riven's laughter. Genuine, unguarded, the kind that came from the stomach. Lena! More laughter. She did not wait for the rest of the sentence. She walked down the corridor, through the servants' entrance, across the dark courtyard, and into the room she had shared with him for 2 years. She did not run. Running was for people who were surprised. She had not been surprised for a long time. She packed in 11 minutes. She counted. Chapter 1. The room they shared was on the 2nd floor of the Alpha's residential wing. A large room by Pack standards, with 2 windows facing east and a hearth fire that Riven preferred kept high regardless of the season. Lena had learned, in 2 years of sharing it, to sleep with one arm outside the covers. Small accommodations, the kind you made without noticing until the moment you began to notice everything. She did not light a candle. She knew the room well enough to move through it in the dark, had always known it better than she let herself acknowledge. The specific knowledge of someone who pays close attention to the spaces they inhabit, because paying close attention was how she had always made herself useful. 2 years of useful. 2 years of present and dependable, and asking for nothing, and existing in the particular invisible way of someone who has decided that being easy to keep is the same as being worth keeping. She had been wrong about that. She pulled her traveling pack from the shelf above the wardrobe and began. The things she took were precise and without sentiment. 2 changes of clothes, her identification papers, her pack correspondence certification that qualified her for administrative work in any territory that operated under the interpack codes, the small pouch of currency she kept in the inner lining of her winter coat, and the 3 books she had brought with her when she first arrived at Greymoor 2 years ago, and which were the only objects in this room that had belonged to her before Riven did. She did not take the bracelet he had given her at their first formal introduction, the silver one with the Greymoor emblem that she had worn every day since, and which sat on the nightstand exactly where she had placed it before the errand that had taken her past the wrong door at the wrong time. She looked at it for one moment in the dark. Then she left it where it was. 11 minutes. She had counted without intending to. The counting had simply happened, her mind doing what it did when she needed it to stay functional rather than feeling, which was to organize, to sequence, to transform the unbearable into a series of manageable tasks. Pack the clothes, retrieve the papers. Do not touch the bracelet. She sat on the edge of the bed they had shared. The bed she had shared with a man who apparently found the question of whether he loved her genuinely funny. And she took a single sheet of paper from the writing desk, and she wrote herself a letter. She had not planned to do this. It arrived as a necessity, the way honest things sometimes did. She wrote it in the dark, her handwriting slightly uneven from the speed and the cold, and she wrote the things she needed to say to the person she was in that moment, so that some future version of herself, the one who would be tempted to rewrite this night into something more ambiguous, something more forgivable, something that let her return to a version of events where she had misunderstood, would have the evidence. You heard correctly. You did not misunderstand. The laugh was real, and the words were real, and the 2 years were real, and this is what they amounted to. You are not furniture. You are not just there. You are leaving now, and you are right to leave, and do not let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise. She folded the letter twice. She tucked it inside her coat, against her sternum, above her heart. Then she stood up. Then the door opened and Riven walked in. He stopped when he saw her. Saw the pack. Saw her coat already on, already fastened. His expression moved through several configurations in quick succession. Surprise, then confusion, then the particular careful blankness of a man calculating how much he had been heard. Lena. She looked at him. She had spent 2 years looking at this man with the specific attentiveness of someone who had made him the center of their attention, and she looked at him now with all of that accumulated knowledge, and she felt the structure of everything she had built around him, doing something she had not built it to do, not collapsing, not cracking, simply becoming transparent. She could see through it to the other side, and on the other side, there was just a man standing in a doorway calculating his exposure. "Going somewhere?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Lena, whatever you think you heard." "I heard clearly," she said. "I always hear clearly. That was the problem." She moved toward the door. He was standing in it. He did not step aside immediately, not aggressively, not deliberately, simply with the reflexive assumption of a man who expected the obstacle of his presence to be sufficient. She looked at him and waited. He stepped aside. She walked through the door and down the corridor and out of the residential wing and across the outer courtyard and through the eastern gate and into the dark territory beyond Greymoor's walls, and she did not look back once, not because she was not tempted, but because she had promised herself, in the letter folded against her heart, that she would not. The world outside Greymoor's walls was cold and dark, and without the particular warmth of a pack's collective presence that wolves felt as a constant background hum. She had never been outside pack territory alone before. The absence of it was more physical than she had expected. A specific silence in the chest where the pack bond had been, like a room with the furniture removed. She walked. The stakes were these, as Riven's unclaimed mate. They had never formally bonded, she understood now, because he had never intended to. She had no pack status independent of his. Leaving meant rogue classification. Rogues had no territory rights, no pack protection, no right of sanctuary on any claimed land without explicit permission from the territory's alpha. She was, by every formal measure, completely without protection. She had her certification papers, she had her skills. She had 11 minutes of packing and one folded letter and the specific, cold, clarifying knowledge of a woman who had just been told, without being told, exactly what she was worth to the person she had organized her life around. She walked faster. She had a direction. 3 territories east before dawn, before Riven finished calculating what her departure meant for his standing and sent wolves after her. 3 territories east was Ashford. Enemy territory, by Greymoor's accounting, a generation of cold conflict and border disputes, and the specific mutual contempt of packs who shared a boundary and had never learned to share it gracefully. Riven would not look for her there. That was the only recommendation she needed. Chapter 2. She reached the Ashford tree line as the sky was beginning its first gray suggestion of dawn. Not light yet, only the absence of the deepest dark. The hour that was neither night nor morning, and belonged to neither with any conviction. She had walked for 4 hours. Her feet understood this more precisely than the rest of her did. The border wolves found her at the outer tree line with the efficiency of a pack that took its perimeter seriously. 2 of them, large, silent, with the particular economy of movement that marked wolves who had been doing this long enough to stop performing it. They positioned themselves on either side of her without touching her, which was the correct protocol for an unchallenging rogue, and which told her usefully that Ashford trained its border wolves in the codes. She stopped walking. She kept her hands visible. "Lena Vash," she said before they asked. Rogue classification as of approximately 3 hours ago. Former unclaimed mate of Riven Cade of Greymoor Pack. I am requesting temporary sanctuary under Article 7 of the Interpack Codes, which guarantees a rogue female safe passage and a period of formal assessment before any territory determination is made. The border wolves looked at each other. "You know Article 7, the larger one said. It was not quite a question. "I have pack administration certification," she said. "I know Articles 1 through 19 and most of 23. A pause. "Wait here," he said. She waited. The dawn arrived incrementally around her, the gray deepening into something that was almost color, the forest resolving from shapes into trees. She was cold in a way that had moved past the stage of being primarily physical and had become something more general, a pervasive quality of the morning that she was simply inside. She thought briefly about the bracelet on the nightstand. She was glad she had left it. They took her to the Alpha. Cassian Reese's study was at the center of Ashford's main complex, a working room, not a ceremonial one, with the particular organized density of a space that was genuinely used rather than arranged for impression. Maps, correspondence in sorted stacks, a fire that had been burning for hours rather than lit for the occasion, books with their spines creased from actual reading rather than display. She noticed all of this in the time it took him to look up from the document he was reading. He was younger than she had expected. Riven had spoken of Cassian Reese in the vocabulary reserved for established threats, as a known quantity, a generational problem, the alpha of a pack that Greymoor would be dealing with indefinitely. This vocabulary had constructed, in Lena's mind, a figure of a certain age and settled authority. The man behind the desk was perhaps 30. Dark-haired, lean, with the particular quality of stillness that she was beginning to understand, was not a personality trait, but a discipline. The deliberate quietness of someone who had learned that most situations revealed themselves more completely if you did not fill them with your own noise. He looked at her. Something moved in his expression, swift, controlled, gone before she could name it, like a candle in a draft that steadied itself before the flame went out. Article 7, he said. Yes, she said. My border wolves tell me you cited it unprompted and correctly. I like to know the rules of the spaces I'm moving through, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Greymoor, he said. Former, she said. As of 3 hours ago? Riven Cade's mate. His unclaimed mate, she said, which is a meaningfully different thing, as it turns out. Something moved in his expression again. This time, it took slightly longer to control. Sanctuary, he said. Under Article 7, 30 days of formal assessment, during which time you are under this territory's protection and cannot be claimed, recalled, or removed by any outside party without your explicit consent. Yes, she said. I can offer you that, he said, and then, before she could respond, I can also offer you something more permanent if the assessment period is insufficient. Ashford has need of someone with pack administration skills. The position would come with full territory residency rights, which supersede rogue classification entirely. She studied him. You are offering me employment. I am offering you a reason to stay that has nothing to do with Article 7's 30-day limit, he said. Precisely, without particular warmth or particular coldness. I have conditions, she said. Name them, he said. I work for the position, not for Sanctuary. I am not a charity case, and I will not be treated as one. My skills are real, and my work will be real, and I will be compensated accordingly. Agreed, he said. And when I choose to leave, if I choose to leave, I leave with my full territory residency rights intact and portable. They do not expire with my employment. He held her gaze. Agreed. She waited for the hesitation, the negotiating counter. The small repositioning of terms that men who held power did when they wanted to remind you that the power was theirs to extend or withdraw. It did not come. Then we have an arrangement, she said. He nodded once. He reached for a fresh document from the correspondence stack and began to write, and she understood that she was watching a man who had agreed to her terms and was immediately putting them in writing without being asked, and she filed this away in the part of her mind that catalogued significant differences between people. She took the folded letter from inside her coat while he wrote, just briefly, just to feel its presence, and then she put it back. She had a great deal to figure out, but she was inside 4 walls that were not Greymoor's, and the wolves outside this door had not been sent by Riven, and the man across the desk was writing down her conditions in his own hand. It was, she decided, a sufficient beginning. Chapter 3. Ashford was not what Greymoor had described. Greymoor had described it as aggressive, territorial, prone to provocation. the accounting of a pack that needed an enemy on its eastern border to justify the resources it spent watching that border. What Lena found in the first 3 weeks of her residency was a pack that was none of these things and several things Greymoor had never mentioned. Organized, multilingual in its treaty correspondence, governed by a council structure that gave senior wolves genuine input into pack decisions rather than the ceremonial input that Greymoor's council had operated on. She was good at her work. She had always been good at her work. It was, she understood now, with the clarity that distance provided, the primary way she had justified her presence everywhere she had ever been. But at Greymoor, her competence had been received as a convenience, absorbed into the general machinery of the pack without acknowledgement, because acknowledging it would have required seeing her, and seeing her would have required Riven to reckon with the specific quality of what he had next to him. At Ashford, they saw her. Not dramatically, not with ceremony or fanfare, simply with the ordinary, unremarkable attentiveness of wolves who worked alongside someone and noticed what they did and said so. The correspondence secretary thanked her for the treaty language revision that saved 3 hours of renegotiation. The senior administrator asked her opinion on a border code interpretation before submitting the formal response. These were small things. They accumulated. Cassian noticed her noticing things. This was its own category of problem. She had not expected to find him interesting. She had arrived at Ashford in the specific emotional condition of someone who had just had their understanding of what they deserved recalibrated downward by 2 years of being furniture, and in that condition, the last thing she had been looking for was a reason to find any alpha interesting. She had been looking for safety, stability, the particular relief of a space where she could be competent without being invisible, and invisible without being dismissed. What she had found, in addition to this, was a man who listened. Not performatively, not with the particular attentive expression of someone waiting for their turn to speak. He listened the way people listened when they genuinely expected to learn something, fully, without interrupting, following the thread of what she said to its conclusion before responding. She found this disorienting in the way that unexpectedly good things were disorienting when you had been calibrated for their absence. She used wit as a deflection mechanism when conversations grew warm. He found her wit more interesting than deflection. She found this additionally disorienting. The news from Greymoor arrived at the end of the 3rd week. His beta, Caius, delivered it to her directly, a courtesy she had not expected, and which told her something about how Cassian ran his court. Riven's beta cord had presented formally at Ashford's border with a diplomatic request for information on a rogue female of Lena's description. Cassian had attended the meeting himself. He had denied all knowledge with the particular flat neutrality of a man who had made a decision and was not negotiating it, and had further noted for the record that Ashford's territory residency agreements were confidential under interpack codes and not subject to outside inquiry. Cord had left. Lena received this over breakfast. She set her spoon down once. She picked it up again. Cassian, across the table, watched her do this. He said nothing. He returned to his correspondence. She was aware of his awareness of her for the rest of the morning, and she told herself, with the firmness of someone who had recently learned the cost of building too much on too little, that she was not reading significance into attentiveness. That attentiveness was not the same as caring. That she had been here before, in a different form, and with a different man, and she knew what the furniture felt like from the inside. She told herself this several times. It became less convincing each time. Mira arrived on the 22nd day. She was everything her reputation suggested. Tall, dark-haired, dressed in the pale silver of the Eastern Territories, with the particular ease of someone who had grown up understanding that their appearance was a form of currency and had learned to spend it strategically. She was warm in the public rooms and precise in the private ones, and Lena, who had spent 2 years learning to read rooms and the people in them, catalogued her within 4 hours of arrival. She catalogued particularly the way Mira positioned herself near Cassian at formal occasions. Close, angled slightly toward him, with the body language of a woman who had decided something and was in the process of making it legible to any wolves in the room who might be considering competing. Lena observed this with the attentiveness of someone taking inventory. She was not yet certain of the inventory's purpose. She only knew that she was taking it. Chapter 4. The border skirmish happened on a Tuesday, which was nobody's fault and everybody's problem. A Greymoor patrol had crossed the eastern boundary marker, not deliberately according to their subsequent accounting, but the distinction between deliberate and careless was one that border wolves on both sides had learned to treat with considerable skepticism. Ashford's response was proportionate and swift. 2 wolves were injured, neither critically, and the Greymoor patrol retreated before the engagement escalated to something that would require formal council involvement. The injured were brought back to Ashford's main court at midday. Lena was in the Eastern Records room when the word came through. She was not a healer. She had no particular medical training. She was also, as she had been for 37 days, the person in any given space who noticed what needed doing before anyone had articulated the need and simply began doing it. What needed doing when the injured wolves arrived was organization. The healers were skilled but understaffed for simultaneous cases. The required supplies were in 3 different storage rooms. The families of the injured wolves needed accurate information delivered calmly rather than the fragmented second-hand versions that were already circulating through the court. She spent 6 hours doing all of these things. She did not think about Riven once. She thought about this afterward with a specific quality of attention. The noticing of an absence where she had expected a presence. 6 hours of sustained focus on something real and needed, and she had not thought of him at all, and the absence of his presence in her thoughts had not felt like loss. It had felt like space. Cassian found her at 8 in the evening in the healer's corridor, sitting on the stone floor with her back against the wall, knees drawn up, hands open in her lap, not injured, not distressed in any visible way, simply sitting in the specific posture of someone who had given everything they had to a situation that needed it and had reached the floor because the floor was what was available. He sat beside her, not across from her, not in a chair at a professional distance, beside her on the floor, with his back against the same wall and his long legs stretched out in front of him, and the particular physical ease of a man who had decided this was where he was going to be, and had no interest in making it look like anything other than what it was. They sat in silence for a long time. The corridor was empty around them. The healers had moved to the recovery rooms. The sounds of the court were distant and muffled. The particular quiet of a building that had been through something difficult and was now in the early stages of settling. "I was invisible for 2 years," she said. She had not planned to say it. It arrived the way things arrived when she was tired enough that the careful management of what she revealed became too expensive to maintain. "I kept thinking that if I was useful enough, present enough, easy enough, quiet enough, eventually I would become worth seeing. That visibility was something you earned through sufficiency. That if I just reached the threshold of sufficient, I would stop being furniture and start being a person." The corridor held the silence around her words. 2 years, she said. "I never reached the threshold, because the threshold wasn't real. The threshold was something I invented to explain why I wasn't being seen, because the alternative explanation was that he simply wasn't looking." Cassian was quiet for a moment. "Then, I saw you before you crossed the gate?" She turned her head to look at him. He was looking at the corridor wall. His profile in the low torchlight was the profile of a man who had said something he had been holding back for longer than the conversation. Something that had come out not from decision, but from the specific exhaustion of one moment too many of not saying it. He did not look at her. She looked at him for a long moment, at the plain practicality of him, the floor sitting, the absence of any performance of authority or distance, and she felt something move in her chest that she had been carefully budgeting against. She did not name it. She filed it. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for the border meeting, for the territory papers." "You don't need to thank me for the territory papers," he said. "They were your conditions. I agreed to your conditions." "People agree to conditions and then reinterpret them," she said. "I don't," he said. She believed him. This was its own problem. By morning, they were both back inside the professional distances the arrangement required. She in the Eastern Records room, he in correspondence meetings, the corridor on the floor existing in the category of things that had happened and had not yet been classified. But she carried what he had said the way she carried the folded letter, not thinking about it directly, simply aware of its presence, the way you were aware of something in your pocket that you were not yet ready to take out and examine. "I saw you before you crossed the gate." She took the letter out that evening and read it once. Then she put it back. Chapter 5. Riven arrived on a Wednesday. He came in person this time. No beta, no diplomatic pretense, simply himself and 2 pack wolves at the outer gate, with a formal request for audience that cited personal matters under interpack codes, which was the category that covered mate disputes, and which Cassian, by the letter of those codes, could not refuse. Lena received the news from Caius at breakfast, and received it with the same complete stillness she brought to information she had been half expecting and had refused to fully expect, because expecting it required allocating emotional preparation she had other uses for. She looked at her tea for a moment. Then she said, "When?" "This afternoon." Caius said, "Alpha Cassian asks whether you wish to be present at the formal reception or whether you prefer to meet separately." "Separately," she said. "After the formal reception, I will speak to him myself." Caius nodded. He left. She was aware, for the rest of the morning, of the particular quality of a day that contains something you are waiting for. She worked. She was efficient. She processed the Eastern correspondence backlog with the methodical focus of someone using competence as a form of self-management. She did not think about what she was going to say to Riven, because she already knew what she was going to say to Riven. She had known for 38 days. What she had not anticipated was Mira. Mira found her in the records room at mid-morning with the particular pleasantness of someone who had timed their arrival carefully and was delivering something they had dressed as concern. "I wanted to speak with you before this afternoon," Mira said, sitting across from her with the ease of someone who had decided she was entitled to the chair. "About Cassian." Lena set her pen down. She waited. "He is a good alpha," Mira said. "A careful one. He understands what his territory needs, which is stability and alliance. He has been in correspondence with my family for several months." A pause. "The Eastern Alliance requires a political mating. This has been understood by both parties for some time." Lena looked at her. "I tell you this," Mira continued, "because I think you are an intelligent woman who deserves accurate information rather than comfortable assumptions. Whatever has developed between you and Cassian, and I have eyes, I can see what has developed. It does not change the political mathematics. His territory needs what my family can provide. You are," she paused, "a rogue with a residency agreement," Lena said, quietly, completing the sentence so Mira did not have to. Mira's expression shifted slightly, something that was almost respect before it was redirected into pleasantness. "I simply think you should know the full picture," she said, "before you make decisions based on incomplete information." She left. Lena sat in the records room and felt the floor do the thing floors did when they revealed a drop you had not known was there. Not collapse, not panic, simply the specific cold sensation of a belief encountering evidence that required it to be revised. The same sensation she had had in the corridor outside Riven's meeting hall. The same clarity of a structure becoming transparent. She had done this before. She reached inside her coat and took out the folded letter. She unfolded it on the desk in front of her. The smeared ink, the uneven lines, the handwriting of a woman packing in the dark. She read it once. "You are not furniture. You are not just there. You are leaving now, and you are right to leave." She had written it to prevent herself from returning to Riven. She had not considered she might need it to prevent herself from something else entirely. She folded it. She put it back. She went to meet Riven. The meeting was brief and held in one of the smaller receiving rooms with the clean impersonality of neutral territory. Riven was not what she had remembered, or rather, he was exactly what she had remembered, which was the point. He was handsome and certain and accustomed to the assumption that his presence in a room was its most significant element. He had been looking for her. The pack was different without her. He had not understood what he had. She listened to all of it. She felt nothing that resembled the devastation she had once imagined this conversation would produce. She felt, instead, the clean quiet of a woman who had already made her accounting and closed the ledger. "I told you what you were to me," she said. "Not to my face. You never told me anything to my face. But you said it, and it was true. And we both know it was true. I was convenient. I was just there. And I am not available to be just there anymore." She stood. "I hope you build something worth staying in," she said. "I mean it without malice." She walked out. She walked back through the court, and she was nearly at the eastern corridor when she understood, fully and without ambiguity, what she needed to do next. Not because of Mira's information, not to respond to it, not to act from the fear it had planted, but because she had spent 6 weeks becoming someone who faced things directly rather than packing in the dark and leaving. And the thing she needed to face was in a study at the end of this corridor. She knocked. "Come in," Cassian said. Chapter 6. He was at his desk when she entered. Not in the studied pose of someone who had been waiting, but in the genuine posture of someone working, which was how she always found him, which was one of the things she had filed away in the category of significant differences. He looked up. He read her face in the way he had always read her face, quickly, completely, without asking her to explain what she had not yet put into words. She had noticed, in 6 weeks of working near this man, that he did not require verbal confirmation of things he could already see. He simply adjusted his understanding and proceeded from there. "Riven," he said, not a question. "Done," she said. "That is not why I'm here." He waited. She sat in the chair across from his desk, the same chair she had sat in on the first morning. The morning she had cited Article 7 and named her conditions, and watched him write them down without being asked. She looked at him across the desk, and she delivered the speech she had constructed during the walk down the corridor, which was the speech of a woman who had learned from 2 years of not being seen that the cost of silence was higher than the cost of honesty. "Mira told me about the Eastern Alliance," she said. "About the political mating. I am not here to argue with the political mathematics. I understand what a territory this size requires, and I understand that what I can offer and what her family can offer are different categories of thing." She paused. "I am here to tell you that my territory residency rights are portable and permanent per our written agreement, and I intend to exercise them independently. I will finish the current correspondence cycle, 2 weeks of work, and then I will establish independent residence under rogue-to-resident conversion, which the new interpack codes permit without pack affiliation." She stood. "You gave me something here," she said. "Real work and real seeing, and a floor to sit on when I had nothing left. I am not ungrateful for it. But I am also not available to be the warm presence in the background of someone else's political arrangement. And I think you deserve someone who is choosing you fully, rather than someone who is staying, because leaving requires more energy than she's worth." She heard herself use the words. She had not planned that. They arrived from the letter, from Riven's voice in the corridor, from the specific vocabulary of being dismissed, and she used them not as accusation, but as evidence. I know what that looks like now. I will not build another life inside it. She turned toward the door. I have not been corresponding with Mira's family about a mating arrangement, Cassian said. She stopped. His voice was very level, not defensive, not urgent, simply precise in the way he was always precise when he had something accurate to deliver. I have been corresponding with them about a trade route, he said. The Eastern Passage has been disputed for 11 years. Her family controls 3 waypoints. The correspondence has been ongoing for 4 months and has nothing to do with a mating arrangement, political or otherwise. She stood at the door with her hand not quite on the handle. She told you otherwise, he said. It was not a question. The corridor was visible through the gap where the door stood slightly open. The same corridor she had walked down on the first morning, rogue and cold, and carrying 11 minutes of packing. She looked at it for a moment, then she turned around. Yes, she said. She did. Cassian stood up from behind the desk. He did not move toward her, not yet. He simply stood, with the particular quality of stillness that was not distance, but the opposite of distance, the stillness of someone who has stopped governing the space between himself and what he wants. Then I need you to hear something, he said, before you make a decision about that corridor. She looked at him. She let go of the door. Chapter 7. He came around the desk. He did not cross the room entirely. He stopped at its midpoint, which left space between them that was neither the space of professional distance nor the absence of it, but something more honest than either. The space of a man who understood that the next step was not his to take. The night you arrived, he said, I was in this study. The border report had not yet reached me. My wolves were still at the tree line. You were still in the forest. I was reading a trade correspondence that I have now read approximately 9 times without retaining its contents, because I could not concentrate on it. She waited. Something happened, he said, in my chest, before I knew you were there, before the report, before the gate, before any of the words. Something located itself with a precision I had not felt before and have not been able to govern since. He said this simply, without drama, as a fact being reported accurately. I knew what it was, he said. I have been alpha of this territory for 6 years. I know the difference between a wolf responding to proximity and a wolf responding to something specific. This was specific. You came to the gate, she said, remembering. The border wolves had brought her to the study, and he had already been moving toward the door when they arrived, as though he had known the direction before being given the destination. I came to the gate, he said. Yes. A pause. I agreed to your conditions in under 10 seconds, he said, because refusing was not a real consideration for me, and performing deliberation would have been dishonest. You asked for fair terms, and I gave you fair terms, because you deserved fair terms, and because I was aware already that I was going to need you to trust this territory, and trust was not something I was willing to manufacture. The border meeting, she said, with Cord. The most difficult diplomatic exchange I have conducted in 6 years, he said. Because what Cord was asking, information on your whereabouts, your status, your intention to return, was information that was not his to have and not mine to give, and what I wanted to say was considerably outside the bounds of Interpack protocol. "What did you want to say?" she said. He looked at her directly. "That she is here. That she is under this territory's protection. That she is not returning to Greymoor, and that anyone who comes to this border again with that request will be received with considerably less diplomacy than they received today." Something moved in her chest. "The corridor," he said, "on the floor, after the skirmish." "Yes," she said. "I sat on that floor because you were on that floor, and the chair across the room was too far away, and I was finished with distance for that particular evening." He paused. "I said what I said because I had been holding it for 5 weeks, and you were tired and honest, and I was tired of being only the thing the arrangement permitted me to be." She looked at him. "I saw you before you crossed the gate," he said again, the same words from the corridor, but differently weighted now, not as an admission that had escaped, but as a fact being stated for the record. "I have been watching you become yourself inside this court for 6 weeks, and every day I have been more certain of what I am watching and less able to say so, because you arrived as someone who had just been told she was just there, and I was not going to be another person who decided what you were before asking." The folded letter was inside her coat. She was aware of it, its weight, its 2 folds, the smeared ink of a woman packing in the dark who needed to leave herself evidence of her own worth. She thought about what she had written. "You are not furniture. You are not just there." She had written it as a warning to herself, a preventative, a record to consult when she was tempted to revise the truth of that night into something more forgivable. She had not written it as a destination, but that was what it had become, not the document of a woman escaping, but the first draft of a woman arriving somewhere new. Someone who noticed things worth keeping and trusted that instinct before anyone else had weighed in on it. She reached inside her coat. She took out the letter. She held it for a moment, the 2 folds, the weight of it, 38 days of carrying it. And she looked at it, and then she looked at him, and she said, quietly and without performance, "I wrote this to myself the night I left, to prevent myself from going back." "I know," he said. "I don't need it for that anymore," she said. "I haven't needed it for that for some time." "What do you need it for?" he said. She thought about this honestly. "I've been using it to remind myself that I'm allowed to want things, that wanting isn't the same as being inconvenient, that I'm not just there." "You are not just there," he said, with the particular weight of someone who had been waiting for the right moment to say something they had known for a long time. "You are the reason I have been in this study at the same hour every evening for 6 weeks, working on correspondence that could have waited, because you passed my window on the way back from the Eastern Records Room, and I have learned, without particularly meaning to, that I need that specific thing in my day." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she put the letter back inside her coat. Not away, not dismissed, simply held. Not ready to burn it yet, but not needing it between herself and this moment. She crossed the remaining space between them. She looked up at him with clear eyes. Not desperate, not grateful, not performing the relief of someone rescued. Simply herself, present and chosen and choosing back. "The trade route correspondence," she said. "The Eastern Passage dispute, 11 years. "Yes," he said. "I know the Interpack codes for disputed passage resolution," she said. "Articles 14 through 17. I've been meaning to mention it." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the thing that happened to his face when she said something he had not anticipated and found more interesting than whatever he had been expecting. "Have you?" he said. "I have," she said. He took her hand. She let him. Epilogue. 7 months later. The eastern courtyard of Ashford on a morning in late spring. The same courtyard where she had arrived, rogue and cold, carrying 11 minutes of packing and 1 folded letter, and the specific clarity of a woman who had finally understood what she was not. The courtyard was different in the morning light of late spring. She had not seen it like this on the night she arrived, had not seen anything on the night she arrived except the darkness and the border wolves and the gate and the forward direction of her own feet. She had not had the luxury of noticing. Now she noticed. The old stone warm with the season, the eastern wall covered in something flowering and green. The particular quality of light that came over the Ashford Hills in the morning and turned everything it touched into a version of itself that was slightly more than ordinary. Riven's fate had arrived 4 months ago. Delivered by Caius in the tone he used for information that was complete and required no editorial commentary. Cord, Riven's beta, the man who had laughed in the meeting hall, the man who had asked the question whose answer had sent her into the dark, had submitted a recording of that evening's conversation to the Interpack Council 3 months after her departure. He had done this, his accompanying letter stated, because he had asked the question as a genuine inquiry and had not liked the answer he received, and had liked even less the consequences of that answer for someone who had not deserved them. The council had conducted a formal review. Greymoor Pack now operated under governance restructuring. Riven held a diminished role with no mating authority and no capacity to classify anyone as rogue without council approval. She had received this information and felt, primarily, the clean satisfaction of an accounting that had been completed correctly. She stood in the courtyard now with the folded letter in her hand. It was the same letter, 1 page, smeared ink, 2 folds. She had carried it for 7 months through the dark and the arrival, and the 6 weeks of becoming, and the corridor floor, and the study, and everything that had come after. It had served its purpose approximately 3 times over. She had kept it past its usefulness because some things you kept past their usefulness not out of need, but out of a quality of respect for what they had done, for the specific service of a document that had told the truth when telling the truth was difficult, and had kept telling it every time she unfolded it in the dark. She did not need it anymore. Not to prevent herself from returning to Riven. That door had been closed and locked, and the key thrown away with her own hands. Not to remind herself she was worth wanting. She had 7 months of evidence for that now, accumulated in the unremarkable daily currency of being seen by someone who had been watching for her before she crossed the gate. Not even to remember who she had been on the night she wrote it, because she had not lost that woman. She had become the next version of her. She held the letter over the small iron brazier in the courtyard's corner, the one the kitchen staff used for morning fire starting, and she let the flame catch the corner of the page. It went quickly, paper to light to nothing. She watched it go and felt, in the watching, something that was not loss but completion, the specific sensation of a thing fulfilling its final purpose, which was to no longer be needed. You are not furniture. You are not just there. She knew. She heard the courtyard go quiet behind her in the particular way it went quiet when Cassian entered a space. She had learned this in 7 months, the way she had learned everything about him, without particularly meaning to, through the accumulation of a specific attentiveness that had never felt like effort. He came to stand beside her at the brazier. He looked at the last of the ash. He did not ask. She did not explain. He took her hand, and she leaned into the warmth of him, and they stood together in the eastern courtyard of Ashford, in the late spring morning light, in the place where she had arrived with nothing and had found, entirely by accident and entirely on her own terms, that nothing had been more than sufficient to begin with. Wolfpack, if you stayed until the very last word, you know that the bravest thing she ever did was not leaving Greymoor. It was walking back through that study door. Drop a love in the comments. When Mira delivered that lie in Chapter 5, did you want to reach through the screen? And did Cord's confession surprise you? Like this story, subscribe so you never miss what the Wolfpack gets next. And let's see how far Lena's story travels.